Officer Ronan Blaine didn't just patrol the streets, he owned them, or at least that's what he told himself every time he pinned a badge to his chest. He viewed the law not as a set of rules, but as a weapon to be wielded against those he deemed unworthy. But on a rainy Tuesday in Detroit, Ronan made a calculation error that would cost him everything. He saw a black man in a luxury car and assumed he was looking at a criminal. He didn't know he was looking at Special Agent Kaden Voss, a man who hunted monsters for a living. Ronan was about to pull over the one man with the power to turn his life into a living hell. This isn't just a story about an arrest, it's a story about the most satisfying karma you will ever witness. The rain in Detroit didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was the kind of night where the streetlights hummed with a nervous energy, and the shadows seemed to stretch a little longer than usual. Officer Ronan Blaine sat in his patrol car, parked in the alleyway off Jefferson Avenue. The engine idled with a low rumble, vibrating against his spine. He took a sip of lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup, his eyes scanning the intersection like a hawk watching a field of mice. Ronan was a veteran of the force. He was built like a vending machine, blocky, hard, and prone to malfunctioning if you pushed the wrong buttons. His reputation preceded him. In the locker room, they called him the Hammer because to him, everything looked like a nail. But on the streets, the whispers were different. They called him a tyrant. "Quiet night," said the man in the passenger seat. Officer Declan Riley was fresh out of the academy, with a face that still looked like it belonged in a college yearbook. He was gripping the door handle tightly, his knuckles white. This was his week riding with Ronan, and he had already learned that silence was usually the safest option. "Quiet is bad, Riley." Ronan grunted, crumpling the coffee cup and tossing it onto the floorboard, adding to a pile of trash. "Quiet means they're plotting. The roaches only come out when they think the lights are off." Riley shifted uncomfortably. "Right. But maybe people are just sleeping, sir." Ronan laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "Sleeping in this neighborhood? Nobody sleeps here, Riley. They deal, they steal, or they run. Our job is to catch them before they do." Ronan put the cruiser into gear and pulled out onto the main road. The wipers slapped rhythmically against the windshield. He hated this precinct. He hated the people in it. He felt like a zookeeper in a facility where the cages were left unlocked. They cruised past a row of boarded-up storefronts. Then Ronan saw it. Parked legally near a fire hydrant, but not too close, was an obsidian black Dodge Charger. It was pristine. Rain beat it off the wax job like diamonds. The windows were tinted, but the street lamp above illuminated the silhouette of the driver. Ronan slowed the cruiser to a crawl. Well, what do we have here?" "It's just a car, Ronan," Riley said, checking his onboard computer. "Parked legally. Look at the rims, Riley. Look at the finish." Ronan sneered, pointing a thick finger at the vehicle. "That's an expensive car. You think anyone living in this zip code makes that kind of money legally? That's drug money or blood money." Ronan pulled up behind the Charger and flashed his spotlight, blinding the driver via the rearview mirror. He didn't turn on his sirens yet. He wanted to see the reaction. Inside the Charger, Kaden Voss didn't flinch. He adjusted his rearview mirror to deflect the glare and continued typing on his encrypted laptop. Kaden was a man of stillness. He was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Ronan's monthly salary. He wasn't a dealer. He wasn't a thief. He was a senior special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, currently leading a task force on public corruption. He was in Detroit to meet a confidential informant regarding a judge who was taking bribes. He was tired, he was hungry, and he was currently annoyed. "Run the plate," Ronan barked at Riley. Riley typed in the numbers. Michigan plates, minimal history, registered to a Smith Consulting Group. No warrants. No stolen reports. It's clean, Ronan. Shell company? Ronan muttered. Classic money laundering. I'm lighting him up. On what grounds? Riley asked, panic rising in his voice. He's parked. The engine is off. Ronan smirked, flipping the switch for the overhead lights. Blue and red exploded against the wet brick buildings. Suspicious activity in a high-crime area. And look at that tail light. Looks cracked to me. It's not cracked, Ronan. It is, if I say it is. Ronan slammed the car door open and stepped out into the rain. He adjusted his belt, resting his hand on the grip of his service pistol, a habit he did subconsciously, a silent threat to the world. He didn't put on his hat. He wanted the rain to hit his face. It made him look tougher, he thought. He walked toward the Charger, his gait heavy and arrogant. He didn't approach with caution. He approached with ownership. He tapped his baton against the rear fender, a loud metallic clack designed to startle. Kaden Voss sighed, closed his laptop, and slid it into his briefcase. He lowered the window as Ronan approached. Officer, Kaden said. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and devoid of fear. Ronan leaned down, putting his face inches from the window. He smelled the interior, new leather and expensive cologne. It infuriated him. License and registration, Ronan demanded, not offering a greeting. May I ask the reason for the stop? Kaden asked, his hands resting clearly on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. You can ask whatever you want after you give me your ID, Ronan snapped. Now, or do I have to drag you out of there? Kaden held Ronan's gaze. Ronan had stared down gangbangers, murderers, and junkies. Usually they looked away. They looked down. They looked nervous. Kaden did none of those things. He looked at Ronan with an analytical detachment, like a scientist observing a particularly interesting strain of bacteria. My identification is in my inside jacket pocket, Kaden stated clearly. I'm reaching for it now, slowly. Slow, Ronan hissed, his hand tightening on his gun. Kaden moved with deliberate precision. He pulled out a slim leather wallet. He didn't hand it over immediately. He opened it, displaying a driver's license. Ronan snatched it from his hand. Kaden Voss, Maryland license. You're a long way from home, boy. I'm in town on business. What kind of business? Selling poison to kids? Kaden's eyes narrowed slightly. Consulting. Consulting. Ronan mocked. He looked back at Riley, who was standing by the cruiser looking miserable. Ronan turned back to Kaden. Get out of the car. Officer, I have provided my identification. Unless you have probable cause to believe I have committed a crime, I am not required to exit the vehicle. The air between them seemed to drop degrees. Ronan's face turned a shade of mottled red. He wasn't used to the law being quoted back at him, not by someone who looked like Kaden. I said. Ronan unclipped the retention strap on his holster. Get out of the car. Kaden paused. He knew the type. He had studied the psychological profiles of power-tripping officers for years. If he resisted, Ronan would escalate. If he complied, Ronan would likely still escalate, but Kaden would have the moral and legal high ground on camera. Kaden unbuckled his seatbelt. I am complying under duress, he said loud enough for Riley to hear. Shut up and move, Ronan spat. Kaden opened the door and stepped out. He stood taller than Ronan, broad-shouldered and fit. The rain soaked his suit immediately, but he didn't shiver. He stood tall. He stood. Ronan hated that height difference. He stepped in close, invading Kaden's personal space, trying to force him to step back. Kaden stood like a statue. "Turn around," Ronan ordered. "Hands on the hood." "Am I under arrest?" "You're being detained for investigation. Hands on the hood." Ronan shoved Kaden's shoulder. Kaden allowed himself to be pushed, placing his hands on the wet metal of his charger. "Officer, I feel compelled to inform you that I am a federal agent. My credentials are in the same wallet you just took." Ronan froze for a split second. Then a wicked, incredulous grin spread across his face. He laughed. It was a loud, barking sound that echoed in the empty street. "A federal agent." Ronan scoffed. "Yeah, and I'm the King of England. I've heard every lie in the book, buddy. I'm a Fed. I know the mayor. My dad is a lawyer. You think buying a fake badge online scares me?" "Check the wallet," Kaden said calmly. "Check the panel behind the badge." Ronan opened the wallet again. He saw the gold shield, Federal Bureau of Investigation. It looked real. It felt heavy. But Ronan's bias was a fortress that logic couldn't breach. In his mind, a black man in this neighborhood with this car was a criminal. Therefore, the badge had to be fake. It was the only explanation that fit his worldview. "Nice prop," Ronan said, tossing the wallet onto the wet pavement. It landed in a puddle. Kaden's jaw tightened. That was government property. "You just made a significant mistake, Officer Blaine." "Oh, you know my name," Ronan sneered. "It's on your badge, and soon it will be on a scathing indictment." Ronan's eyes went cold. He grabbed Kaden's wrist and twisted it behind his back, hard. "That's a threat against a police officer. It's a statement of fact." "Riley!" Ronan shouted. "Get over here." The rookie ran over, slipping slightly on the wet asphalt. "What is it, Ronan? Is he a Fed?" "He's a liar with a fake badge," Ronan declared. "Probably uses it to shake down other dealers. We're taking him in. Impersonating a federal officer, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct." Riley looked at the wallet in the puddle. He looked at Kaden's calm demeanor. "Ronan, maybe we should run the badge number just to be sure." Ronan's eyes blazed. "I gave you an order, Riley. Cuff him." The click of the handcuffs was the only sound louder than the rain. Riley's hands were shaking as he applied the steel bracelets to Kaden's wrists. He wasn't gentle, but he wasn't rough. Just clumsy with nerves. "Too tight," Kaden noted neutrally. "You're cutting off circulation." "Shut up," Ronan interjected, shoving Kaden's head down against the wet hood of the Charger. "You don't get to give orders here. You're in my world now." Ronan began the pat-down. It was aggressive, bordering on assault. He slapped Kaden's legs apart, his hands searching roughly. He reached into Kaden's jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Ronan looked at it. A high-end government-issue smartphone. "Nice phone," Ronan muttered. He didn't bag it. He slid it into his own pocket. "Evidence." "That phone is encrypted federal property," Kaden said. "If you attempt to access it, you will trigger a lockdown protocol." "You talk too much," Ronan grunted. He continued the search. His hand brushed against something hard on Kaden's right hip. Ronan's eyes widened. "Gun!" he screamed. "He's got a gun!" Ronan ripped his own service weapon from its holster and jammed the barrel into the back of Kaden's neck. "Don't you move, Riley. Draw your weapon." Riley scrambled backward, fumbling for his gun, pointing it with trembling hands at Kaden's back. "Don't move, sir. Please don't move." "It is a Glock 19M, Kaden said, his voice steady despite the gun pressed to his spine. "Standard issue FBI sidearm. The permit is in the wallet you threw in the mud." "Lies," Ronan roared. He reached under Kaden's jacket and yanked the weapon out of its holster. He looked at it. It didn't look like a street piece. It had no serial numbers filed off. It was clean, well-oiled. Carrying a concealed weapon without a permit, Ronan announced, ignoring the reality in front of him. Assault on an officer. This keeps getting better. Ronan grabbed Kaden by the collar of his expensive suit and hauled him upright. You're done. You hear me? You're done. He dragged Kaden towards the patrol car. Kaden didn't struggle. He walked with dignity, even in handcuffs, even with the rain plastering his shirt to his skin. Ronan opened the back door and shoved Kaden inside. The hard plastic seat was uncomfortable. The cage cramped. Ronan slammed the door shut, locking Kaden in. Outside, the rain intensified. Ronan turned to Riley. Search the car. Toss it. Find the drugs. Riley looked at the charger. Ronan, if he really is a Fed. He's not a Fed, you idiot, Ronan shouted, rain dripping from his nose. Look at him. Does he look like a Fed to you? Feds are guys named Smith and Wesson in cheap suits. This guy is a player. Now search the car. Riley looked at the cruiser where Kaden was watching them through the rear window. He couldn't see Kaden's eyes, but he felt them. Ronan, Riley whispered. I didn't see that there before. Ronan turned to him, his eyes like two pieces of flint. It was there, Riley. You just missed it. Because you're a rookie, but I found it, right? There was a heavy silence. The rain poured down. Ronan's hand rested on his gun. The threat was implicit. Get on board or you're against me. Riley looked at the charger. He looked at Ronan. He squeezed his eyes shut. Right, Riley said, his voice barely audible. You found it? Good lad. Ronan grinned, patting Riley hard on the shoulder. Now let's tow this piece of junk and book our agent. Ronan walked back to the cruiser. He opened the driver's door and slid in. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Kaden. Gotcha, Ronan said to the reflection. Possession with intent. Illegal firearm. Impersonation. You're going away for a long time, buddy. Kaden leaned forward slightly, his face emerging from the shadows of the back seat. He spoke through the plexiglass partition. Officer Blaine, Kaden said. You just turned off your body camera before you approached my car. You think that protects you? But you forgot something. Ronan started the engine. Yeah. What's that? My car has 360-degree dash cams. They record audio and video. They upload to a cloud server in real time, and they are powered by an auxiliary battery. Ronan froze. His hand hovered over the gear shift. Also, Kaden continued, you didn't turn off your partner's camera. Ronan whipped his head around to look at Riley in the passenger seat. Riley was staring straight ahead, his chest heaving. The little green light on Riley's chest mount was blinking steadily. Blink, blink, blink. Riley, Ronan growled. Did you cut your feed? Riley didn't answer. He just stared at the rain. Riley, I forgot. Riley lied, or maybe he didn't. Riley squeezed his eyes shut. It's been running the whole time. Damn it. Ronan slammed his fist against the steering wheel. He took a deep breath. It doesn't matter. It's dark. The angle is bad. It won't show me dropping the bag. It'll just show me finding it. It's my word against his. Ronan put the car in drive and peeled away from the curb, leaving the Charger behind for the tow truck. You better hope your lawyer's a magician. Kaden didn't respond. He just sat back and closed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping. He was memorizing. He was counting the seconds. And he was waiting for the moment the trap would snap shut. The ride to the precinct was short. Ronan drove fast, aggressive, taking corners too sharp, throwing Kaden around in the back. He wanted to rattle him. He wanted to see fear. But when they pulled into the sally port of the station, Kaden looked as fresh as if he'd just stepped out of a spa. Ronan hauled him out of the car. "Welcome to the Hotel California," Ronan sneered. They walked him into the booking area. The station was busy, phones ringing, drunks shouting, the smell of bleach and sweat. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking woman named Sergeant Serena Novak, looked up. "What you got, Ronan?" "Big catch, Sarge," Ronan boasted, slamming the baggie of white powder onto the high counter. "Possession with intent, illegal firearm, and get this, impersonating a federal officer." Novak looked at Kaden. She looked at the suit. She looked at the way he held himself. She frowned. "Impersonating?" she asked. "Flashed a fake badge," Ronan said. "Real fancy prop." Kaden spoke up. "Sergeant, I am requesting my one phone call immediately, and I am advising you to log my personal effects with extreme caution. Specifically, the wallet Officer Blaine threw in a puddle." Novak looked at Ronan. "You threw his wallet in a puddle." "It slipped," Ronan lied. "Sergeant," Kaden said, "my name is Kaden Voss. If you run my fingerprints, you will see a red flag on your system. It will say, 'Do not detain.' It will provide a number for the Washington field office." Ronan laughed. "Listen to this guy. Listen to him. He never stops." Novak wasn't laughing. She had been on the job long enough to know that confidence like this wasn't usually faked. "Book him," Ronan ordered. "Put him in box 1. I want to have a little chat with him before the lawyers get here." "Ronan," Novak said warningly, "do it by the book. Always, Sarge. Always." Ronan grabbed Kaden's arm and shoved him toward the interrogation rooms as the heavy steel door clicked shut behind them, isolating them from the rest of the station. Ronan turned off the camera in the corner of the room. "Now," Ronan said, rolling up his sleeves, "let's talk about who you really work for." Kaden sat in the metal chair, his hands cuffed to the table. "You're not talking much anymore, are you?" Ronan taunted, leaning against the door frame. "Where's all that lawyer talk? Where's the big bad federal agent now?" Kaden slowly lifted his head. "I am waiting, Officer Blaine." "Waiting for what? The Easter Bunny?" Ronan laughed, slamming his hand on the table. The metal rang out a sharp, painful sound in the small room. "You're waiting for a miracle, and I'm fresh out of those." Ronan pulled out a chair and spun it around, straddling it so he was face to face with Kaden. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of coffee and cigarettes. "Here's how this works," Ronan whispered conspiratorially. "I know you're a dealer. I know that car is bought with blood money. You give me a name, a supplier, a rival, I don't care. And maybe I lose the baggie of powder I found. Maybe the gun charge goes away. You walk out with a misdemeanor." Kaden looked at Ronan with genuine pity. It was a look that infuriated Ronan more than anger would have. "Ronan," Kaden said softly, "you have a mortgage on a house in Shelby Township that is underwater. You have 2 ex-wives who are currently suing you for back alimony. You've been passed over for promotion to detective times because of excessive force complaints. You are a man who feels the world is shrinking around him. So you use this badge to expand your territory." Ronan's face went slack. How do you know about my house?" "I told you," Kaden said. "I am a senior special agent. Profiling isn't just my job. It's my life. I know you, Ronan. I know that you planted those drugs because you were terrified of being wrong. You saw a black man in a nice car, and your bias wrote a story that reality didn't match. So, you edited reality. Ronan stood up so fast, his chair clattered to the floor. Shut up. You don't know me. I know you're scared. Kaden continued, his voice calm and relentless. And you should be, because right now Sergeant Novak is running my fingerprints through the AFIS database. Do you know what happens when a level 5 clearance print hits the system? Ronan raised his fist. He was trembling with rage. I'm going to shut that mouth for you. Just as Ronan's fist clenched, a frantic pounding came from the heavy steel door. Bam! 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 Ronan, open up now. It was Riley's voice, high-pitched and cracking. Ronan lowered his fist, glaring at Kaden. Don't move! Ronan unlocked the door and cracked it open. Riley was standing there, his face pale as a sheet. Behind him, the hum of the station had changed. The casual chatter was gone. Phones were ringing unanswered. What is it, Riley? I'm working him. Ronan. Riley swallowed hard. Sarge. She ran the prints, and the system crashed, Ronan. It didn't just give a record, it locked her terminal. A red screen popped up. It said critical alert. Department of Homeland Security notified. Ronan blinked. It's a glitch. Computers mess up all the time. No, Ronan, Riley whispered, grabbing Ronan's arm. Sarge called the number on the screen. She thought it was tech support. A woman answered. She said, This is the director's office. Confirm the location of Agent Voss immediately. Ronan felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. He looked back at Kaden, who was watching them through the crack in the door with a small, knowing smile. It's a trick, Ronan muttered, pulling his arm away. He hacked the system. That's it. He's a hacker. Ronan, listen to me, Riley hissed. They said he's not just an agent. They said he's the head of the anti-corruption task force. Ronan, that's us. He hunts us. Before Ronan could process this, the floor of the police station seemed to vibrate. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of heavy vehicles, many of them, pulling up onto the pavement outside. The sound of screeching tires penetrated the brick walls. Then the distinct rhythmic thud, thud, thud of a helicopter rotor beat the air directly above the building. Ronan walked out of the interrogation room into the hallway. He looked toward the front entrance of the precinct. Through the glass double doors, he saw lights. Not the blue and red of police cruisers. These lights were solid, blinding white strobes. And then the glass doors shattered. The front doors of the precinct didn't just open. They were breached. 6 men in full tactical gear poured into the lobby. They wore olive drab uniforms with heavy body armor. Across their chests in bold yellow letters was the word FBI. They moved with a fluidity and precision that made the regular beat cops look like amateurs. They fanned out instantly, weapons raised but disciplined, fingers off triggers, scanning, assessing. Federal agents, the lead operator bellowed, his voice amplified by the enclosed space. Hands where we can see them. Nobody moves. The station froze. Sergeant Serena Novak stood up slowly behind the high desk, her hands raised. 2 rookies near the coffee machine dropped their mugs, ceramic shattering on the floor. Behind the tactical team walked a man who radiated authority like a blast furnace. He was tall, wearing a long trench coat over a suit that cost more than the precinct's annual budget. He had silver hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. This was Assistant Director Tariq Lang, and he looked ready to burn the building down. He marched straight to the desk. Who is the watch commander? I am, sir. Sergeant Novak stammered. Sergeant Serena Novak. Lang slammed a piece of paper onto the desk. You have a federal agent in custody, Special Agent Kaden Voss. Where is he? Novak pointed a shaking finger toward the hallway leading to the holding cells. Interrogation Room 1. Officer Blaine has him. Lang turned to his team. Secure the hallway. Nobody leaves, nobody enters. If anyone reaches for a weapon, you neutralize them. Yes, sir, the team shouted in unison. Lang stormed down the hallway, his heels clicking ominously on the linoleum. Back in the hallway, Ronan Blaine stood frozen. He watched the tactical team secure the lobby. He saw the assistant director marching toward him. His brain was trying to find an exit, a justification, a lie that would work. But the walls were closing in. Riley, standing next to Ronan, finally broke. He backed away from Ronan, hands raised in the air. I didn't do it, Riley shouted at the approaching agents. I just drove the car. I told him it was a mistake. Ronan turned to look at Riley with betrayal in his eyes, but before he could speak, Lang was there. 2 tactical operators flanked Lang, their rifles pointed at the floor but ready to snap up in a millisecond. Lang stopped feet from Ronan. He looked at Ronan's badge number. He looked at Ronan's face. He looked at him with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. Officer Blaine, I presume, Lang said. His voice was dangerously quiet. Who are you? Ronan demanded, trying to summon his old bravado, but his voice cracked. You can't just barge in here. This is my jurisdiction. Lang stepped closer. Your jurisdiction ended the moment you put handcuffs on one of my men. Open that door. He's a suspect, Ronan yelled, desperate now. He had drugs. He had an illegal gun. He was impersonating. Open the door, Lang roared. The sound echoed off the cinder blocks, silencing the entire building. Ronan's hand trembled as he reached for the key on his belt. He fumbled, dropping them once before jamming the key into the lock. He turned it and pushed the door open. Inside, Kaden was still sitting calmly. He looked up as the door opened. Took you long enough, Tariq. Kaden deadpanned. Traffic was bad. It's raining. Lang replied, his expression softening slightly as he looked at his colleague. And we had to wake up a judge to get the warrant for this entire building. Lang stepped aside. Get him out of those. One of the tactical operators moved past Ronan, shoving him into the wall with a hard shoulder check. The operator produced a key and unlocked Kaden's handcuffs. Kaden stood up, rubbing his wrists. He adjusted his suit jacket, straightened his tie, and picked up his damp trench coat from the back of the chair. He walked out of the interrogation room. He stood in the hallway, face to face with Ronan Blaine. The power dynamic had shifted so violently the air felt charged with static. Kaden was no longer the suspect. He was the hunter. Ronan was the prey. Officer Blaine, Kaden said calmly. I believe you have something of mine. Ronan stared, mouth agape. My phone, Kaden prompted. And my wallet. Ronan reached into his pocket with a shaking hand and pulled out the phone. He handed it over. And the wallet? It's at the scene, Ronan whispered. In a puddle. Kaden nodded slowly. Evidence tampering, destruction of federal property. We'll add it to the list. Kaden turned to Lang. Did you bring the tech? Tech team is in the parking lot, Lang said. They're pulling the cloud data from your car right now. Good, Kaden said. He turned back to Ronan. Ronan, I told you that you were making a mistake. I told you that camera was running. You chose not to believe me. Riley, cowering against the wall, spoke up. It's true. He planted it. I saw him. He had a baggie in his belt. He dropped it in the car. I wanted to say something, but I was scared. Ronan whirled on Riley. You rat, you liar. Silence, Lang shouted. Kaden stepped forward, invading Ronan's space just as Ronan had done to him on the street. You wanted to be the hammer, Ronan. You wanted to crush the nail. Kaden leaned in, his voice a low rumble. I am not the nail. I am the anvil, and you just broke yourself against me. The bullpen of the precinct had been transformed into a temporary command center. The regular officers were corralled on one side of the room, watched over by 2 FBI SWAT operators. They looked confused, scared, and angry. On the other side, the FBI tech team had set up laptops on the sergeant's desk. A large monitor on the wall, usually used for shift briefings, was now connected to one of the laptops. Kaden stood in the center of the room. Someone had brought him a coffee, a real one, not the swill from the vending machine. He took a sip and looked at the crowd of officers. Can I have your attention, please? Kaden announced. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried instantly. The room went silent. My name is Special Agent Voss. For months, I have been investigating systemic corruption within the Detroit police force. We suspected that officers were planting evidence to meet arrest quotas and seizing assets for personal gain. A murmur went through the crowd of officers. Some looked guilty, others looked shocked. Tonight, Kaden continued, Officer Blaine provided us with the smoking gun. He nodded to the tech agent at the desk. Play it. On the big screen, the video feed appeared. It was high-definition, wide-angle footage from the interior of Kaden's Charger. The audio was crystal clear. Video. The rain battered the windshield. The door opened. Ronan Blaine leaned in. Audio. Ronan. Riley, go check the trunk. Video. Ronan looked over his shoulder to ensure Riley was gone. Then, with a quick, practiced motion, he reached into his belt. The camera caught the clear reflection of the baggie in his hand. He dropped it onto the floor mat. He nudged it under the seat with his finger. Audio. Ronan. Found it, right there under the seat. Cocaine. The room gasped. It was undeniable. It was high-definition corruption, caught in 4K resolution. Kaden gestured to the screen. This is a felony. It is kidnapping. It is perjury. It is a violation of civil rights under color of law. He turned to look at Ronan, who was standing near the entrance, flanked by agents. Ronan's face was gray. He looked like a man watching his own funeral. But we aren't done, Kaden said. Play the audio from the cruiser. The tech switched files. The screen went black, but the audio played. It was the conversation between Ronan and Riley after the arrest. Audio. Ronan. It doesn't matter. It's dark. It'll just show me finding it. It's my word against his. Audio. Ronan. You better hope your lawyer's a magician. Kaden stopped the playback. He walked over to Ronan. You relied on the darkness, Ronan. You relied on the fact that people wouldn't believe a black man over a badge. You banked your entire career on the hope that I was powerless. Ronan stared at the floor. Kaden turned to the other officers in the room. And let this be a lesson to the rest of you. If you saw this happening and said nothing, you are complicit. Officer Riley. Riley jumped. Yes, sir. You spoke up too late to save your career, Kaden said. But your testimony might keep you out of prison. You're under arrest as well, accessory to a felony. Riley put his head in his hands and sobbed. Kaden turned back to Ronan. He held out his hand. Badge, Kaden commanded. And gun. Ronan hesitated. For years, that badge had been his identity. Without it, he was nothing. Take it, Lang ordered from the side. Ronan slowly unpinned the badge. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it. It clattered onto the floor, landing face down. Kaden didn't pick it up. He let it lie there. "Turn around," Kaden said. Ronan turned around slowly. Kaden reached for his belt. He didn't use his own handcuffs. He reached into Ronan's back pocket and pulled out Ronan's own cuffs, the same ones that had been on Kaden's wrists. The metal clicked shut around Ronan's wrists. "Tight, isn't it?" Kaden whispered in Ronan's ear. The walk from the bullpen to the transport van was the longest walk of Ronan Blaine's life. Standard procedure for arresting an officer usually involved a back exit, a discreet car, maybe a jacket over the head to hide the shame. Kaden Voss didn't believe in standard procedure for predators. "Take him out the front," Kaden ordered. "Sir?" an agent asked. "There's press out there. The helicopter woke up the whole neighborhood." "I know," Kaden said. "Let them see." 2 FBI agents grabbed Ronan by the arms and marched him toward the shattered front doors. Kaden walked behind them. As they stepped out into the rainy night, the scene was chaotic. News vans had arrived, their satellite dishes extended. Blue and red lights from state trooper cars who had arrived to support the FBI reflected off the wet pavement. A crowd had gathered. Neighbors, shop owners, people from the community who had lived under the shadow of the hammer for years. When they saw Ronan Blaine in handcuffs, a silence fell over the crowd. Then a single voice shouted, "About time!" The crowd erupted. There were cheers, and shouts of relief. Flashbulbs popped, blinding Ronan. He tried to duck his head, but the agents held him upright. Kaden stopped on the steps of the precinct. He watched as Ronan was loaded into the back of a federal transport van, a cage much smaller and less comfortable than his patrol car. As the doors were slamming shut, Ronan looked out one last time. He locked eyes with Kaden. There was no anger left in Ronan's eyes, only the crushing realization of total ruin. He had lost his pension. He would lose his freedom. He would likely lose his family. He would be a cop in prison, a death sentence in itself. Kaden just nodded. A silent final goodbye. Karma served. The van drove away, followed by 3 black SUVs. Kaden stood on the steps, the rain still falling, but the storm was breaking. Assistant Director Tariq Lang stepped up beside him. "You okay, Kaden?" "I'm fine, Tariq," Kaden said, taking a deep breath of the wet air. "Just another Tuesday." "We found the stash in his locker," Lang said quietly. "Baggies, drop guns, cash. He's been doing this for years. We're going to reopen every case he's touched. Hundreds of people might go free because of tonight." Kaden looked out at the street where his Charger was being loaded onto a flatbed to be taken for evidence processing and detailing. "That," Kaden said, "is the best news I've heard all night." He looked at the crowd, still cheering. "You know Tariq," Kaden mused. "He called me a nail. He said he was the hammer." "Yeah, he forgot that hammers are tools," Kaden said, buttoning his coat. "And when a tool's broken, you throw it away." Kaden walked down the steps, the sea of media parting for him. He didn't stop for interviews. He didn't seek the spotlight. He just walked toward the black SUV waiting for him, a silent guardian who had turned a predator into prey. The rain washed the streets of Detroit, and for the first time in a long time, the pavement felt a little bit cleaner. Months had passed since the rain-slicked night on Jefferson Avenue. The seasons had turned, winter's gray slush giving way to a humid Detroit summer. But for Ronan Blaine, time had stopped the moment the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The hall of justice was packed beyond capacity. The air conditioning struggled to compete with the body heat of spectators, reporters, and community activists. This wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. Ronan sat at the defense table. He was unrecognizable. The bulk was gone, replaced by a doughy, pale looseness. His expensive suit hung off him like a costume. He hadn't seen the sun in months, having been held in federal detention without bail, a flight risk the judge had ruled given his access to hidden cash caches. His attorney, a court-appointed public defender named Silas Hale, looked exhausted. Ronan had drained his savings on a private defense team that quit when they realized the evidence against him was insurmountable. Now he was left with Hale, a man who seemed to view Ronan not as a client, but as a burden. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Judge Serena Novak swept into the room. She was a stern woman with a reputation for zero tolerance regarding public corruption. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the jury. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged schoolteacher, stood up. She didn't look at Ronan. No one looked at Ronan anymore. He was a ghost in his own life. "We have, Your Honor." Ronan gripped the table. His knuckles were white. He prayed to a God he hadn't spoken to in decades. Just one acquittal, just a hung jury. Please. On count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law. The foreperson read, her voice steady. Guilty. Ronan flinched as if struck. On count 2, falsification of records in a federal investigation. Guilty. On count 3, possession of narcotics with intent to distribute. Guilty. On count 4, perjury. Guilty. The list went on. Counts, guilties. Each one was a nail in the coffin of his life. The courtroom remained silent per the judge's strict instructions, but the energy was palpable. It was a collective exhale of a community that had held its breath for too long. Judge Novak looked at Ronan. "Sentencing will be carried out immediately, Mr. Blaine, do you have anything to say?" Ronan stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He looked at the gallery. He saw his ex-wife, Mira. She wasn't crying. She looked relieved. He saw Declan Riley, his former rookie partner. Riley had taken a plea deal, years probation and a lifetime ban from law enforcement in exchange for testifying against Ronan. Riley looked down at his shoes. Then Ronan saw him. Sitting in the front row wearing a navy blue suit was Special Agent Kaden Voss. He sat with the same stillness he had possessed in the car. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He looked like a man watching a building collapse safely into its own footprint. Ronan's voice croaked. He cleared his throat. "I was a good cop. I put bad guys away. I made the streets safe. Maybe I lost my way, but I did it for the right reasons." It was the wrong thing to say. Judge Novak's face darkened. "Mr. Blaine, you didn't lose your way. You paved a new road into the gutter. You didn't make the streets safe. You made them a marketplace for your own greed. You planted drugs on innocent citizens. You terrorized a community you swore to protect. And when you finally met someone with the power to stop you, you tried to destroy him too." The judge picked up a stack of papers. "The pre-sentencing report suggests leniency due to your years of service. I am rejecting that suggestion. Your years of service are an aggravating factor. You knew the law better than anyone, and you used it as a weapon." The judge leaned forward. "Ronan Blaine, I sentence you to a total of years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. You will serve your time in a maximum security facility. Years." Ronan did the math instantly. He was middle-aged. He would be old if he ever walked out. He would die in a cage. The gavel banged down. It sounded like a gunshot. "Remand the prisoner." Two U.S. Marshals stepped forward. They didn't handle him gently. They spun him around and cuffed him, hands behind the back, just the way he liked to do it. As they marched him out of the courtroom, Ronan looked back one last time. He tried to catch Kaden's eye, perhaps looking for forgiveness, perhaps looking for a gloat. Kaden simply checked his watch, stood up, and walked out of the side exit. He had work to do. The reality of karma, the hard karma, wasn't just the prison sentence. That was just the beginning. Later, Ronan was processed into USP Terre Haute. Because he was an ex-cop, he couldn't be placed in the general population immediately. It would be a death sentence. Instead, he was placed in administrative segregation. Solitary confinement, hours a day in a concrete box, no interaction, no control. But the world outside kept turning, dismantling everything Ronan had built. His asset forfeiture case came next. The government seized everything. The house in Shelby Township, gone. His truck, gone. His pension, revoked entirely. His wife Mira finalized the divorce. She cited irreconcilable differences and moral turpitude. Because Ronan had hidden assets in her name, without her knowledge, she was almost charged as an accomplice. To clear her name, she gave the FBI the location of a safety deposit box Ronan had buried in his mother's backyard. It contained cash stolen from drug busts over the years. That money was used to establish the Voss Blaine Restitution Fund, a legal grant designed to help the victims of Ronan's false arrests overturn their convictions. And that was the true twist of the knife. Months into his sentence, Ronan was allowed access to a small television in the common area during his hour of recreation. A news report came on. It was a press conference. The Detroit District Attorney stood at a podium next to Special Agent Kaden Voss. "Thanks to the diligent work of the FBI's Anti-Corruption Task Force," the DA announced, "we have reviewed cases involving former Officer Ronan Blaine. Today, we are moving to vacate the convictions of men and women who were unjustly imprisoned based on his fabricated evidence." The camera panned to the crowd. Families were hugging. Men who had been in prison for years were walking free, holding their children. Ronan watched from his cage. He saw the joy he had stolen being returned. One of the men on the screen, a young mechanic Ronan had framed, spoke to the camera. "I always knew the truth would come out. I just thank God for that FBI agent. He didn't just save himself, he saved all of us." Ronan turned off the TV. He sat in the plastic chair, the silence of the prison pressing in on him. He realized then that he would be remembered not as the hammer, not as a hero, but as the villain in everyone else's success story. Later, Kaden Voss pulled his Dodge Charger up to the same curb on Jefferson Avenue. It was raining again. He put the car in park, but he didn't get out. He watched the street. It looked different. The boarded-up storefronts were being renovated. A new community center had opened on the corner, funded in part by the seized assets from the precinct corruption ring. A patrol car rolled by. It slowed down. The officer inside was young, maybe Riley's age. He looked at the Charger. He looked at the license plate. He didn't flash his lights. He didn't blip his siren. The officer waved, a polite, respectful wave. Kaden returned the gesture. The patrol car moved on, patrolling, not hunting. Kaden smiled, a genuine, tired smile. He put the Charger in gear and pulled away, the tires humming on the wet asphalt. The storm was over. The streets were clear. And somewhere deep in a federal penitentiary, Ronan Blaine was staring at a concrete wall, finally understanding that in the end, the law doesn't bow to the badge, it bows to the truth. This story reminds us that authority without accountability is just tyranny in a uniform. Ronan Blaine believed his badge made him a god, but he forgot that true power lies in integrity, not intimidation. He underestimated Kaden Voss, not because Kaden broke the law, but because Ronan was blinded by his own prejudice. The satisfaction of this story isn't just in the arrest, it's in the systemic cleansing that followed. Ronan didn't just lose his freedom, he funded the liberation of his victims. That is the ultimate karma, when the villain is forced to pay for the hero's victory. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please like this video. It helps us beat the algorithm just like Kaden beat the charges. Share this with a friend who loves a good karma twist, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Justice is served every week right here. Thanks for watching.